Hello, friends. I'm here with today's question, which is, are you living your life leaning in or are you living your life leaning settled back? Well, this has came up for me this week as a very important question, and I had so much insight from exploring this that I felt like this would be perfect for us to talk about today. So, what happened to me was I was years and years ago. My grandson was interested in Harry Potter, and so I went to a few Harry Potter movies with him, but it never became the craze for me that it did for him. He had the cape and the wand and the whole nine yards, but for me it was, kind of a kid's thing, and I enjoyed it with him, but didn't go there for myself so much. And so out of the blue, I just got the urge to read those books. I was looking for some kind of a different story, and um, those Harry Potter books were on the shelf, and I thought, okay, well, let's see what all the hubbub was about. So I started reading the series, and I did get really entranced. I discovered that the books, even though the movies are fantastic, not saying anything bad about the movies, but the books amplify the story tremendously. And so I've really been getting into it. And I noticed that one of the things that had bothered me about the movies that I forgot was that this little boy had to face this evil dark lord, at least in the beginning of these fights. He was on his own. And it was bothering me. It's like, why did this woman write this book for kids and showing this little boy facing this horribly scary monster, evil, dark lord by himself? And that took me down a rabbit hole about my own life. Why did that bother me so much? And what I discovered was that in my childhood, due to some family stuff that's not worth going into, I was coming up against not a dark lord. Don't misunderstand me. I didn't have that kind of a childhood, but my dad was, he ruled our house with an iron fist, and in that sense, not dark, but he was the boss. And you just did not, if you if you valued your well-being, you did not challenge the boss. So I grew up in an environment where I was always leaning forward. They call it hypervigilant. I was always looking for where was the next problem going to come from and what could I do to disassociate myself from whatever these things were going to be. And, you know, it just created an environment of leaning in and really, you know, just having this focus on what I didn't want. This was the training, and we talked about this last Monday. We talked about the focus on what you don't want sets up a life that's really not worth living, but it has so much survival value that you really can't help it. Your brain, our brains are structured in a way to do that for us. So whether you really mean to or not, and obviously this kind of thing happens. I mean, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7 years old when this was clearly, I look back now and see this was happening to me. And in fact, I think it even started before that, although that's a really subjective thing on my part. I don't have any evidence for that. But what I do have evidence for is this hypervigilance as a result of having sort of a traumatic environment that's consistently threatening. It was very easy to get in trouble with my dad. And then, as I told you the other day, the shame on you and just really miserable. So this leaning in, trying to anticipate, trying to figure out what he would want and do that and make him happy and please him. This is the start of all my people pleasing days were started back in those days. And so now I understand that I got myself into adulthood with this leaning in mentality, and I've lived my life with it, trying to avoid what I didn't want, having less of a focus on what I did want and a much more on what I didn't want, and how that was really a depressing situation that led to a lot of frustration and not very much satisfaction and an ongoing feeling of not being enough. That's the whole thing. So, um, in my world, this is one of the sadder points that I have to make. In my world, even though I my father was not a dark lord, but he won. He won because it was impossible to challenge him, and I could never win. No matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. And so this idea of you can't win at the game of life. The best you can do is survive, and that just became kind of the cloak that I wore around myself through my life. And the problem with this, friends, now that I'm doing all this research, is I realize that it puts you in an untenable position in terms of your biology. It puts you in a position of being constantly on the alert. And as we talked about the other day, this fight or flight or this freeze mechanism stimulates the parts of your biology that are very aging and inflaming. And inflammation being the underlying factor in so many chronic diseases that people struggle with: heart disease, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, diabetes. These are all, at least in part, caused by chronic inflammation in the body's inability to ever put the fire out. And so I had a coaching session about it, and this word came up, abiding. I really like this word, abiding. I can't really explain why. It has a nurturing feeling to me. And it doesn't, it has this settled back energy that I'm really trying to offer you today. Abiding, when you abide, you're not on alert. You're settled back. Your physiology, your biology has a chance to rest. It has a chance to repair itself. It has a chance to restore. It has a chance to, so to speak, take out the cellular garbage and cleanse itself. And all of these things are very, very healthy, vitalizing, and what I like to call youthing. It creates the youthing biology in the body. So that's what I came up for me in this coaching session, is that now that I see all this, and now that that situation is not a situation that I'm living in anymore, can I learn to abide? And so as I explored this idea of abiding, what does it take to abide? And the number one thing it takes is trust. Now, trust in what? Well, one thing that's very important is to be able to trust yourself, right? We were talking about this the other day, that there are mechanisms that fuel self-doubt, and the opposite of those mechanisms fuel self-trust. And when you walk through the world trusting yourself, you end up putting out a very confident energy, not because you can do everything right, not because you're perfect, not because you never make a mistake, but you trust yourself to move through life in a way that's adaptive. So that if you try plan A as an entrepreneur and you run into obstacles and you figure out things that you didn't know, and you learn something, then you can adapt and try again and either succeed or have more learning. And that mechanism is so healthy, friends. It allows you to be optimistic and hopeful. It allows you to trust yourself. It allows you to trust life. It even allows you to trust other people to a certain extent. Not a blind trust. Don't misunderstand me. It's not like everybody's good. And if, there's certainly plenty of scammers around, and that is not the place to put your trust. But you can trust in the goodness that it is in the world, and you can seek it out and learn to discern. Maybe you make a few mistakes, but you learn to discern who and what you can trust and where you need to be more skeptical and guarded and look for proof and look for answers and wait. Sometimes it's just really good to wait and let a situation evolve and let people reveal themselves to you, show you who they really are. And then you can move forward, or you can say this is not a good situation for me, and you can go down another path. But do you see how all of that language allows you to have a settled back orientation to your life, a life of trust, a life of safety. And this is what the miracle is occurring in my life is I have finally begun to understand how I can cultivate that. Now, the science piece of this is super reassuring because this scientist, we talked a little bit about him before, but I want to talk a little more this time. His name is Dr. Michael Merzenich, UC San Francisco, and he's done this research about the neuroplasticity of the brain. And this is so encouraging because he has studied men and women, I hope, that are 90 years old and found that their brains are actually growing, building neural pathways all the time. And this is exciting because if the pathway that I had, which is a distrust and a leaning in and a hypervigilance and a whole fear-based orientation, if that's running the show, then those neural pathways, as we talked about with the polyvagal theory, those pathways get myelinated and they're really quick. And when anything trips into a pathway like that, it zoom, you go from I'm okay to red alert just in a nanosecond. But the new neural pathways that I know that I can be cultivating now are the opposite of that. And as I train myself on a day-to-day basis, going back again and again and again to this attitude of trust, this position of trust, this position of the world is safe. Even with the chaos out there, I have resources. I can be trusted to adapt and respond appropriately to what life brings my way. And that allows me to live in a more settled back state. So the brain, here's the really important part. The brain doesn't rewire through repetition of what it already knows. It rewires based on new experiences. And this is why our little practices are so cool, because in 2 or 3 minutes, you can set a new neural pathway to being formed in your brain. And this is a good thing, right? The more of those we create, the more often we activate them through our thoughts, through our feelings, through our responses to life, we begin to myelinate those neural pathways that are the settled back pathways, the trust pathways, the safety pathways. And this is a position where the inflammation can die down and the rejuvenation and revitalization can take place. And then this other piece that I really love so much is your own spark of vitality can be vitalized by this new way of putting yourself, thinking of yourself in the world. And by this intention of allowing the goodness of the source of all life, which is underlying everything, so it has to be underlying you, allowing yourself to learn your own special ways of rekindling that spark and letting that flame, not the inflammation, but this living flame, this healthy flame of life to vitalize your being. And so that's the ultimate goal here. And as you know, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, I think that this is the energy of unconditional love. It's the regenerative, creative force behind all life. And so as we activate these new neural pathways, we're activating the pathways of love, unconditional love, not Hallmark sentimentality, not codependent hanging on, but the love that allows you to be one with all life. And this, friends, is the feeling that is so important because as you really tune into that flame, you can't help but be guided in your life toward your ultimate purpose. And it's my idea that our purposes are meant to be the solution, the problem answers that people are looking for. The solutions that we want are living in our purpose, everybody's purpose. And the people that are way off in the weeds, it's because they're disconnected from their purpose, because their purpose would combine with the purposes of the world. And that's where you get this world flame idea that the world is meant to work for everybody. I know, that sounds very idealistic, but I choose to believe it because I choose to believe that life is intelligent and life is organized for thriving and success. It's not organized for decay, right? I mean, the flower blooms and it decays, but it's not gone forever. It recycles and the plant blooms another flower. So in that sense, life is organized around more life. And that's why I feel so optimistic about our future. So, one of the ways that I'm cultivating this new self-trust and this new safety is having a certain imagination. I when my baby was little, I had a rocking chair and my baby and I would rock in the rocking chair and I would nurse her and it was a very safe and intimate time. Just mother and child communing and oftentimes I would look down at her and she would look up at me and there was just this deep, deep sense of connection. And so now this is one of the images that I am imagining for myself that I am rocking my own self as an infant in my arms next to a roaring fire. And it's safe and it's warm and it's soothing and I'm just allowing my nervous system to imagine that reality because as another thing that science shows us is that our brains don't know the difference between what we imagine and what really happens. This is why it's not so good to imagine things that you don't want to happen because it tends to focus your brain toward that. But you can focus your brain toward what you want, and if you want to feel calm and settled back and safe, you can find your own images. You're welcome to borrow mine, but you may have something else that makes you feel that way. Like many people like to garden and dig in the earth and plant things and see life grow and experience the fruits of the harvest. And that's a beautiful way to experience safety for yourself. So let's move on to our practice. So if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, close your eyes. If not, you can do this with your eyes open, but maybe try it again when you can really settle back and close your eyes. But feel where your body is pointing right now, not just physically, but energetically. Are you reaching out? Are you leaning into? Are you striving and trying and working toward and productivity and goal achievement and that's it's I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but I'm saying that for your nervous system, it's important to have a settled back idea that I'm safe, I'm trusted, I trust myself, I trust that my goals are life is for me, that my goals are coming to me at least as quickly, so I'm moving toward them. So just imagine now, energetically, are you leaning in? And probably, unless you've thought about this before, you probably are, because that's the stance that we are in in our culture these days. But just notice it. It's not wrong and it's not bad. It's just that it's not optimal. And the youthing work is about optimizing your biology and using the systems that are already there to vitalize and energize and inspire and create with the best of who you are. So allow yourself to identify what you're leaning in toward. What are these ideas that are compelling you and maybe tiring you out, maybe exhausting you? And ask yourself gently, what if you stop striving? What if you stop trying so hard? What if you adapt a more trusting attitude toward your life? What would you lose if you stopped trying and striving? So notice that this leaning is never about connection. It's never about safety. It's never about being settled back. It's always about what you don't have that you feel like you absolutely must have. So that's step two. Name what the leaning was protecting. Accomplishment, goals, getting there, arriving, those things. Now imagine something vast. This was another thing that I did this week. I went outside in the evening and looked at the night sky. And I live in a rural area, so there's just millions of stars. And I'm not that big of a stargazer, but I know some of the constellations, and you can see them. Different times of the year, you see different ones in different places. And the Milky Way, that just a suggestion of what's out there. And I realized that even though it was dark and the light was just the pinpoints in the sky, that the sense of being connected to all of that was very alive for me. So where are the connections where you feel very alive? Maybe it's in something like a sports arena where you're really connected to the team and to the fans and to the game. That can be a positive thing. Now, it can be a negative thing too, so don't misunderstand me, but things that give you juice and a feeling of connection, this is what you want to look for in step three, especially a belonging that can't be withdrawn. The night sky is up there. There's nothing that is going to separate us from the night sky, even if you can't see it very well because of the city lights. It's going to be up there. The ocean is going to be out there. There's the natural world is fairly steady. So just notice this inclusion and see if you can allow it to help you settle back. Maybe you're not comfortable doing that very long at first, but if you like that feeling, you might use this little practice every day for a little while and see if you can begin to feel the invigorating benefit of settling back, consciously choosing to interrupt all the busyness and the hurry and the doingness. Feel this connection to something that's of more of an eternal nature and just let yourself settle back. So that's our practice for today. I just want you to know that it's such a privilege for me to share these insights and breakthroughs with you. I know that those of you who feel the pull of why does aging have to be so traumatic? Isn't what are the options here? Surely in the world that we live in, there can be a better way to make your trips around the sun. And there is. Instead of living a stress-filled, inflammatory life, you can begin to teach yourself to live a settled back, trusting, loving life. So please comment below and let me know what moved you about this video, any ideas, any questions, any ways that I can serve you more fully, because it is my deep, deep desire to be of service to you. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.